And we are live. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to another installment of Black Theatre Workshop's In Conversation With series. My name is Quincy Armorer. I'm the Artistic Director of Black Theatre Workshop, and thank you for joining us this afternoon on a bright and beautiful day outside. Today is Thursday, the 13th of August, which means we are pretty much at about the 5-month mark of our social distancing and quarantine. And it's certainly, I'm sure, for many of you, if not all of you out there, been hills and valleys of good days, bad days, struggles, triumphs, everything rolled all into one. And I just wanted to share, I think I've over the past couple of months in particular been thinking a lot about our industry and where we're at and how much we've been affected by what's going on. And it's nice to see now that things are starting to open up again. We're starting to see and hear about some activity, which is really great and inspiring and invigorating. Just a couple things to think about. Our friends over at the Centaur Theatre have their Portico projects coming up, and that's going to be from September the 24th to October the 3rd. Short pieces that are going to be happening outdoors on their Portico front steps, which is really exciting, so you don't want to miss that. We found out recently that our friends over at Geordie Theatre have started rehearsals for their two-play tour, the famous and always entertaining two-play tour from Geordie Theatre. So we're really excited that things are going for them over there too, and looking forward to see what they come up with. And playing also right now, our friends over at Table d'Hôte Theatre, with whom we did the co-production of Angelique back in 2017 and then 2018 and 2019. They have their project that's playing right now called On Point, where they have short plays that are happening from now until, I think it's until September the 27th. And these are short pieces that are outdoors that are very much responding to this pandemic that we're going through. So please go and check out all of the projects from all of these theater companies in town, because it's really exciting to get to see our community and our actors and talent beginning to work again. So please support us all. But today I am very, very excited to be able to welcome my guest. So this gentleman is a friend. We met a few years ago back at the Stratford Festival. He is an actor, a brilliant actor, and he's originally from the United States, but he has spent, I think, the past 10 years here in Canada. He was recently moved back to the States, but he worked, I believe, for 10 seasons at the Stratford Festival, among other places. And we had a lovely chat just a few days ago to talk about the things that we're going to be talking about. It was a really great conversation. There's so much going on with him in terms of his work and his life. And I just thought it would be really great to share some of that with you who are out there, to get to know this super talent. So I'm thrilled to have him with me. And please join me in welcoming my guest for today, actor extraordinaire, E.b.Smith. Hello, sir.
Hi, Quincy. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very well, my friend. A few years ago, you're kind.
Well, what, 10 years is it, I guess?
Yeah, it's been a decade.
It's been a decade. Wow, time waits for no one. But I'm super, super thrilled to have you here, E.b., to talk a little bit, to just share with our audience some of what's been going on with you and your life. As I mentioned, we're now coming up on 5 months of being separated, social distancing. You know, we're people of the theater. We're not used to not being social and physical contact.
That's right.
So it's been a challenge for some people. I always like to start off with just asking my guests to come on, how are you doing?
You know, I'm doing all right. I just moved back to Ohio, like you said, to begin my graduate schooling. And I've moved into a little cabin in the middle of the woods, and it feels really lovely to be able to walk outside and be surrounded by green. So,
yeah, nice, very nice. And did I get that right? Was it 10 years that you were at the festival too?
It was. I did 10 seasons at the Stratford Festival, and then plays in Winnipeg, London, Toronto, sort of all over the place, up in between.
Right. Yeah, we met kind of like overlapping, because we were never actually. Oh, something's gone. We were never actually in a same season together at the same time. I think you came in just as I was heading back home to Montreal. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, my first season we played a couple games of poker together, and I think that was the last time.
That was
we
it.
were in the same.
Yeah, because your first season was 2011, I would imagine. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So have to talk a little bit about that place, about Stratford.
All right.
You know, it's the Stratford Festival, and they, like all of us in this industry, you know, have been shut down, are struggling. You know, there's a lot going on for a lot of people, but there's been, I think, Stratford's been mentioned a lot recently for a couple of different reasons, not just pandemic related. And I know that you played a huge role in what was being talked about, just in terms of, I'm trying to remember, was it the hashtag?
In the dressing room?
Thank you. Yeah, and so I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about that, but you know what, just before we get into that, I mean, many of our patrons watching will not have had an opportunity to see you live on stage. I mean, you've been performing for a number of years. As we mentioned in some of our promo material, you played Orsino at Stratford, a role I know well. I was about to do the Henry Beeley thing. Was like, I've played this role 3 times. I've played Orsino a couple of times, so because I was just watching Slings and Arrows last night. So yeah, you got to do Orsino in Stratford, but there's other one that we mentioned. You got to do the Mountaintop at the Grand in London and play Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Indeed.
Yeah, we did a production of it here in town with a husband and wife team, Tristan Dialala and Letitia Brooks, who were both brilliant together in it. But what is it like for you as an actor with the experience that you have to take on an iconic role that's not just a role? I mean, we're talking about an actual person who lived and breathed and changed the world in a lot of ways. What was it like for you to take on the role of playing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
It was life-changing, certainly. And the thing I love about that show the most, in the way that Katori Hall has created this character, is that she doesn't sort of lionize him. He's fallible. He's a bit fragile. He doesn't have the he has the strength of his conviction, but he doesn't have the impunity of, you know, that sort of godlike stature that we endow our heroes with. And I love that. He's so human in that rendition of his life. So
yeah,
and
very
fictional too, right? So there's so that does take a little bit of the pressure off, I suppose, because you get to explore him as he might be sort of in private, as opposed to trying to recreate the public face.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we discovered in the production that we did too. It's just so much about that private side of this very public figure, and we all know what he was like. But behind closed doors, who was he? What were his struggles and feelings? And as you say, fictional. So it's it's nice to hear you talk about. At least it gave you that kind of, you know, flexibility, or not as much pressure as it would be to portray him in the way that we're so used to having seen him as.
Yeah, there's no curse in that play. You know, he comes on stage and the first thing he does is take a leak. It's sort of like, it's very human.
Dr. King had to pee too.
That's right.
Yeah, and that was with Beryl, correct?
That was with Beryl Bain. That's right.
So I want to get her to come out to Black Theatre Workshop at some point.
It was very interesting too. That experience was interesting too, because Beryl and I faced a bit of friction, shall we say, in London when that was happening. Twice we were accosted on the street, racial epithets being hurled at us, and we found it very interesting that happened during rehearsal of that play of all plays. Yeah. It hasn't happened to me on another project in London in the same way. So that was something to reckon with at that point. Right. There we are.
I love it. Was that experience unique to? I mean, not to you know, paint a bad picture of London or something, but I'm just wondering, you know, as actors, if we're lucky, have an opportunity to go and work at different theater companies in different cities, and that experience of having, you know, racial slurs hurled at you, is that new? Is it something that you've experienced in the past in other cities that you've had to work at, or is it? Do you know what I mean?
I do. You know, it's something that happens, period. And it doesn't really matter what space you're in. It can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
London is an interesting town. It's especially where the theater is located downtown. There is a very broad spectrum of characters you're going to encounter on Richmond Street, downtown London.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from university kids to folks that live sort of on the rougher fringes of the society in London, and you know, it's a fairly homogenous city as well. It's there's not really a critical mass of diversity, shall we say, in that town. And you know, Southern Ontario can be a difficult place for people of color to navigate without facing racism, demonstrable or otherwise. So it wasn't altogether surprising that it happened, and it certainly wasn't the first time that it happened. What was interesting about it was that both occurrences were so sort of brazen in the open, and they both happened within a week of each other, right near the start of rehearsals for this play. It really sort of fed the fire, right? Gave us fuel for the subject matter of that play, which is really actually pretty revolutionary.
Yeah, that's so crazy. I remember like when I got to Stratford, when I was first there, and we were talking about this just a couple nights ago. I had mentioned that you know, I got there and I was discovering what working at the festival was and what living in that town was. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder how long it will be before I hear a certain word.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of beat myself up for thinking that, for going there, but that's just also a part of the reality as a Black person. When you go into a space that you're not familiar with, it's always something that's at the very least in the back of your consciousness, but it's present. And so I was thinking, I wonder how long it's going to be before I hear this word, and it ended up being 8 months and 1 day. I remember specifically how long.
You know,
but you know, that's just what it is. But one of the things that I did want to talk to you about when you were at Stratford, and just recently, in the dressing room, hashtag in the dressing room, which I was so thrilled to be hearing about, to see that there was some action being taken, that people were speaking out about certain experiences that happened at the festival. And realizing and hoping that the festival was watching and listening and learning. Can you just tell us a little bit about what sparked all of this and your involvement in it, and where you believe things are at right now?
Sure. I guess to start at the beginning, after the murder of George Floyd. And protests were sparked across this continent. There was a sort of wave, as I know you're aware, we talked about it the other day, of solidarity statements and pledges of support for Black Lives Matter, and in the theater community, Black artists within organizations across the country. The Stratford Festival statement was unique in that sort of first wave of statements because it managed to take responsibility for the festival's part in white supremacy. They said, we acknowledge that we've upheld this. I can't remember the words exactly, but paraphrasing, we acknowledge that we've upheld these principles of white supremacy and we want to do better. And in the wake of that, they decided to hand over their social media for, I think it was like 72 hours, to the Black artists in the festival company, and that sort of grew as there were a lot of us involved, and so that sort of grew from artists into both administrators and technicians, and you know, any Black person within that festival community. And Erica Croft, who was one of our sort of co-leads on this project, came up with the idea of putting together a hashtag in the dressing room, which would give all of us artists a chance to talk about our experiences under a hashtag that could be searchable and sort of compile a list of stories, basically, of what we felt, what we faced, both in the profession generally and specifically at Stratford.
Right.
And it was it was very interesting to see how the community started rallying around us, because ultimately the audiences don't know what happens behind the scenes generally. It was a window into the experience of being a person of color, Black, Indigenous person of color, in an organization like that, and in the industry in general. And I think a lot of people woke up to the fact that this has not always been a piece of cake to be an actor in a certain skin, particularly in the classical world. And the whole thing culminated in a live stream broadcast, which was a panel discussion between 9 of us within this group, where we sort of, there it is, the Black Like Me panel discussion. And we sort of did a wrap up of what that week had been, the revelations of that week, the In the Dressing Room hashtag, and presented some thoughts as to how to proceed and how to move forward. You know, I don't know that it would have been possible to do such a thing had we not been in this sort of great pause moment of COVID. You know, the theater machine is relentless, and you know well when you're at Stratford or any big company like that, if you're doing multiple shows over the course of a season, you don't have time to stop. Particularly if you're working in rep. You know, administration doesn't have time to stop. The actors don't have time to stop. Nobody has time to stop and think about how they would, in an ideal world, respond to what's happening in the world. But we did in this case. You know, the world had paused. The topic of the day, as it were, was how do we treat Black lives and how do we counter racism that is so lethal in so many cases. And so we were able to gain some traction in that regard and hopefully inspire some real change.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it seemed to me like from someone watching that happen from the outside, it seemed as though they were receptive to hearing about how they can do better. And as you say, they acknowledged the role that they play. So that for me was very promising to see that. And as you say, there's been some positive change that come out of it. I know one of the things that was talked about a fair bit, maybe, I'm not quite sure, had to do with what we were talking about the other night, casting by consent. And this is something where, for those of you who are watching might not know, in certain contracts for actors, you're hired to play a certain role or several roles, but then there's this thing that goes into your contract which is called as cast, which basically leaves things open for the director or the creative team to have the freedom to add extra things for you to do, to put you into other scenes if need be, to fill things out. For many different reasons, the as cast exists. But what was revealed was that it doesn't come without its problems, and I think we're seeing some positive change there. Do you want to just sort of talk about, elaborate a little bit more on that and the change that actually happened?
Sure. You know, none of us get into this business to be an asshole, pardon my French, but we all do enter this business with blind spots and bias that we either don't recognize or don't want to acknowledge. And so the story that I posted on In the Dressing Room under that hashtag was a story of something that happened to me at Stratford in the 2013 season. I had signed an as-cast contract to appear in a production of Othello, and the director, Chris Abraham, had assigned me to essentially, if you know the play, it's Brabantio's Goon Squad, right? Brabantio is Desdemona's father. He doesn't like the fact that Othello's married his daughter, so he sends his soldiers after Othello. And my direction in the moment was to come on stage with the intent to kill Othello for doing this. I come from a mixed race background. You know, this play is interesting to me on some level because it reflects a lens on my identity. You know, my father's Black, my mother's white. So representing something like that on stage, where I was going to try to execute a man for doing what my parents did, what represents me, I didn't feel comfortable with unless we could really tell a story that would make that make sense.
Yeah.
And there was no room for that conversation to be had in the room. my concerns were ignored. And so I posted about this, and soon after the post went up, the responses started sort of flowing in. And Chris, to his credit, apologized and said, "What can I do to help?" And I said, "Well, one thing that we can do is to abolish the ASCAS contract." And that's kind of how the conversation started. Mm-hmm. And so we started rallying support. We called artistic directors from across the country. We spoke at the Stratford Festival. And I got on the phone with our association, Equity, to see what we could be doing to make sure that no one ever has to sign another contract again. Because ultimately, the ASCAS contract is giving directors a blank check.
That's a good way to put it.
And often it's not a problem, but oftentimes it is. And if it is, it can be very damaging. Especially at a place like Stratford, where, you know, if a decision is made in March that you don't have any agency in, you're still going to be living with that decision in November, and that is an enormous psychic burden to carry. So if you're being compromised over the course of 6 to 8 months, every single day in public, it's going to be a lot to unpack that and to try to recover from that. It is in fact a trauma. One of my first assignments at Stratford, in fact, was to enter chained inside of a cage, chained to the walls of a cage with a bag on my head, nearly naked, save a loincloth. And the first moment of action of play was me being murdered with a spear through the back, and I had to hang lifeless in this cage for half an hour on stage.
Wow.
You know, my wide-eyed, bushy-tailed self going into the project, because I got that assignment on the first day, it was sort of like, okay, well, whatever, you know, I'm here at Stratford, yay. After months, you start to realize I'm also representing something. And me as a slave, bound in a cage, murdered and hanging there lifeless, if there is a person of color in this audience that relates to me through the affinity of my skin color, and they're witnessing this, it's going to affect them in ways that are not intended by the director, by the selection of this play. Mm-hmm. It's going to speak to the value of that life unless we address it explicitly. I should say the value to the organization, to the production, to the artistic team of that life, unless we address it specifically, unless it's part of the story. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. Equity is working diligently to try to get this this written into the Canadian Theatre Agreement. We're calling the initiative Casting by Consent as opposed to As Cast, because the thought is that we should have some measure of control over what we present and how we present it on stage. And if you want to ask me to do something that we haven't established yet in a play, I need to reserve the right to say I'm not comfortable with that when it comes time for that establishment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, when you were talking specifically about the Othello experience, I was remembering when I got to play Othello in 2012 at the St. Lawrence Shakespeare Festival, mm-hmm. Which was wonderful. And there was one other Black actor in the company, Adam Pierre. And in the case of our production, he wasn't like one of Brabantio's goons. He was like one of my guys.
Right.
And one of my favorite moments on stage in that show was towards right at the very end, after smothering Desdemona, and then realizing how I'd been duped, and just scanning the room, I would find Adam and we would lock eyes, and there was just something. I'm even getting goosebumps thinking about it right now. Something different to being able to connect with another Black man in that moment that, like, you can't script that. That was just how it happened with our casting. But you can't avoid the reality of what you are putting out there on the stage. And for us, for him and for me, and we've talked about it, it made that moment so much more significant. And so I can totally hear we were talking about being on the other side of that, and how, that would be a discomforting thing to have to portray, particularly if you didn't have the consent in the cast.
And also, to be clear, I mean, I don't think that my objection was to playing the role. My objection was to not having a justification for it. What is the story we're telling?
Right. Gotcha.
I think we can tell any story we want to. We do need to discuss the implications, and are we comfortable with those implications? You know,
yeah.
I've done Othello 5 times now altogether. I haven't played Othello each time, obviously, but to be around that play in various positions, in various iterations, I've we could have an entire hour-long conversation on this play, but I've learned a lot about how it functions and about the role that race does play in that play, especially the unintended consequences of multicultural casting in that play. I mean, it's so explicitly anti-black racist behavior exhibited in that play that to have the complication of other people of color on that stage can be an interesting thing to play with. But I find often we don't, and this is true of every Shakespeare play, often we don't really consider, because we've sort of grown up through this phase of colorblind casting, we don't tend to consider what the implications are of all of that. What does it really mean? I mean, when I did Orsino in Twelfth Night, I remember the reaction of specifically kids of color that would come to see the production, that would bust in, you know, to see a Stratford production. And the response that I got from them was extraordinary. The way they were touched to see a love story in a Shakespeare play between a black Orsino and a black Viola was just, it was so heartening to see that. So
yeah, that was my experience actually also doing Orsino at the NAC, a black Orsino with a black Viola. It was Janelle Cooper was Viola, which is fantastic, and Tristan D. Lala was Sebastian. We had Lucinda Davis in there as Antonio. Like, it was that was something special to be able to share that, particularly in those bits with Orsino and Viola. I'm so hoping that when we get back to being able to do what we do, that there's going to be a little bit more of those. Because I'm supposed to be, like, right now, if it wasn't for a pandemic, I'd be working on a show right now with Lucinda Davis and Mike Payette and Warona Setsuayalo, the 4 of us. And I'm going to stop talking about it now before I start crying on screen here. But E.b., I just want to ask you a little bit. I have to ask you a little bit about what's going on right now with Stratford and an investigation into potential hate crimes based on a photo of a Confederate flag that was taken at some point.
Oh boy!
And I promise you that after we talk about this, we're going to talk about something light and fun.
That's all right.
But this is so super important, and yeah. I think you know, for those who aren't familiar, I'd love them to know what that experience was, has been, and is for you, because it's not over. That stuff stays. It lingers. Yeah, and just I won't say that I was surprised at some of the quote unquote negative backlash that came at you for it, but I was. So maybe if you could just give us a little bit of context of what that is for people who are watching it, might not specifically know. Give us the Coles notes, and then we'll dig a little deeper.
Sure thing. So
thanks, man.
I was walking my dog. This was late June. I was walking my dog around my neighborhood. I lived in an apartment on the north end of town. And as I was coming around the corner, I looked up at my apartment building because some of my neighbors were having a party. And they were out on the balcony drinking and being loud. And, you know, I'm a little bit cautious around people these days because of the virus. And so I thought this is probably not a good idea to be having this gathering. But anyway, I look up the window, and in the window, I see the top third to the top half of a Confederate flag. This apartment was 2 doors down from where I lived, and I felt surprised by this. that symbol is tantamount to flying a swastika. I mean, it's a symbol of hate, particularly to Black people, and particularly to American Black people in particular. But I took a picture of it with my cell phone, and I made a post on Facebook in a local community discussion group, and basically said, "Saw this on my walk. Can we please stop? Can we please not do this anymore, Stratford?" Thinking I'd love to start a conversation about this. I would like to maybe talk to people and educate them about what it means. If they're ignorant to the implications of it, maybe we can have a chance to talk. What I got back was evidence that no one in that town is ignorant to the implications of the Confederate flag. The feedback began with things like, "You don't like it, look away." It evolved into accusations that I was invading privacy by taking a photograph of this flag in a window. I was characterized as a peeping Tom, as a predator. At one point, somebody called me a pedophile who was probably looking for underage children to photograph through their windows as they slept at night or something like that. And then the more explicit threats started. There was one exchange where somebody said, "Why don't you knock on the door, grow a pair of balls and tell him to take the flag down?" And then somebody responded, "Well, then the racists might kill him." And then the first commenter said, "Well, then problem solved."
Wow.
And they got more explicit from there. And so, this all happened in a public forum. The person who organizes this group was in contact with me and said, "Should I take this post down?" And I said, "Absolutely not. This is the town we live in. This is the town I lived in for 10 years. It doesn't surprise me this is happening, but I think people should realize that this is what happens in their midst." And so the post was left up. It was pretty vile, but it also sparked a number of concerned citizens to take it upon themselves to try to identify this behavior more explicitly. And they uncovered a secret Facebook group called No Offense Perth County that was essentially populated with the purpose of not policing political correctness, let's say. And functionally what that did, of course, is allow misogynist racists to say whatever they wanted, no matter how vile, and find a welcome space for that, a place for locker room talk, for blowing off steam, if you will. But in digging through that group, there were posts like a little diorama of a lynching, a photograph of a diorama of a lynching that was a black beer bottle hanging from the ceiling with a noose, and 5, white Coors Light cans with Ku Klux Klan robes.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it was vile stuff. There was hatred on that site towards Greta Thunberg and other activists, and it caused quite a kerfluffle. Anyway, the Stratford police got wind of all of this, and decided to launch a hate crimes investigation into the people that had posted this stuff, into the threats that were made, into the event in general. I'm told that the flag in the apartment was taken down. The police spoke with them, and those folks did take the flag down. But it also exposed sort of the underbelly of Stratford. That 8.5 months or 8 months and 2 days that it took for you to be called the N-word in that town. That's where that came from.
Yeah,
it's still alive and well there, and I think people are finally waking up to the fact that it's incumbent on the community to do something about it, because the community is full of beautiful souls. Yeah. I mean, I have some of the greatest friends I've ever made in the world in that town. Yeah. But much like with what happened in London when I was attacked and somebody called me a nigger on the street, I got a lot of apologies from people that live there. But my response is always to those apologies, I don't need your apology. What I need is you to acknowledge that you have been complicit in creating an environment in which racism can take root. right? Because you haven't said anything, because you haven't been demonstrably anti-racist, you haven't been out front of the issue, right? We all know it exists in the world. It's time to actually say this is not acceptable.
Yeah.
And that seems to be beginning to happen in Stratford.
Good. I'm happy to hear that because you know I enjoyed for the most part my time there. Like, you know, working at that place was special, and as you say, the people are lovely. Some of my dearest friends are people that I met when I was there, and I think, you know, it's one of the interesting things that I find is now I feel like more people are listening and are willing to acknowledge the fact that they haven't been acknowledging what the realities are for POC.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see an active change in the way that people are receiving information when we share it. I've noticed that in my life, which is wonderful. And yeah, just really quickly, like I was talking recently with a friend of mine, and what landed with him was when I was talking about the overlap with the pandemic and Black Lives Matter, and just saying how I would go to the dépanneur here close to my house and like buy a bottle of wine or a case of beer or whatever it is, and because of the pandemic, I'm like, I don't need to take the receipt because I don't want to touch things that other people are touching, until I was walking home and realized I'm a Black man carrying products, alcohol, without the receipt to prove that I paid for it.
Yep.
And it was just like, you know, I can't do that. So now I'm like, I don't want to take it, but yeah, give me the receipt, please. Like 100% of the time I'll take it. And my friend just, it wasn't something that he even considered, and it's fine that he hadn't, because why would he? But at least I could see that landed. And the conversation just opened up, and he was, I think, a little bit more perceptive to realities that he hadn't considered before. And so I think at least if we're seeing more of that, that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
So I'm trying so hard to find the light at the ends of the tunnels, to find the opportunities and the challenges. All of that is kind of where I'm at right now. And as I mentioned, want to talk about something a little bit light and fun for a moment, but it's still very theater connected, because what I've been doing for the past little bit, like obviously we miss what we do and the people that we get to do it with. I was thinking recently about those little moments that we have when you're working on a show, or perhaps even in film as well. Interactions with people that have nothing to do with the show, little backstage things that happen that are just really, really special. And connections that you have with people. And the one I was thinking about just this morning was the Stratford one. When I was there in 2010, I was in Dangerous Liaison. Awesome production with awesome people in it. And it was just this moment at the top of the show where Shauna McKenna was playing the Marquise de Marseille, and for places, she would come in, and we had this platform on wheels that we would have to wheel Shauna and Martha Henry and Yana McIntosh onto the stage. And every performance, when Shauna would come around from her dressing room, I just hold out my hand, she'd take my hand and step up onto it and then take her seat. And it's just those little things that I've been trying to think about lately. It was a lovely, lovely moment that happened. Like, we did 2, maybe 3 performances of Dangerous Liaison per week, and it was a late opener, so it wasn't happened that often. But for me, it was just a really lovely kind of backstage ritual between myself and Shauna that I find really special. And so I just was going to ask you to think about, or maybe share some light, fun, positive theater anecdote or story or moment or experience or interaction or something like that, that is fond to you and representative of why we're all missing what we do right now.
There are so many of those, Quincy.
I bet there are. So just pick 1 or 2 and just share it, because I want to hear more from other people just as much as I want them to listen to me when I say that.
Oh man. There was a production of Mother Courage that was directed by Martha Henry. And Brecht is weird. And so, the way we approached that room was unique, and a lot of us played musical instruments. I played the trumpet on stage for the first time since I was, I think, in middle school. But others of us had guitars and mandolins and violins and pianos. Ben Carlson was on stage with an upright bass. I mean, it was it was ridiculous and amazing. But something that sort of happened organically through that process was that, we're standing backstage with musical instruments and we just started jamming together and singing songs. And so every day before the show would happen, we're at the old Tom Patterson, so it's a wide open room. Like, there's a wall separating us from the audience and the stage, but it's not a complete wall. You can hear things pouring out. Yeah. So every day before the show, the audience was treated to a bit of pre-show music, as we would just jam, like, singing folk songs and whatever together, playing these instruments from backstage just before the curtain rose. And I always loved that. It was such a shattering of convention. It was so informal. It turned the room into a ritual that isn't often seen at a place like Stratford. It wasn't the contribution of some sort of plan. It was the liveliness that can occur when a bunch of artists get together and just want to make something. So that's one that I'll never forget. I loved being a part of that cast. It was just brilliant.
Nice.
There have been a ton of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're lucky. I think that's part of what keeps us doing it. And yeah. I just had a couple happen in my brain as soon as I and then you reiterated the name Martha Henry, who this woman is just so dear to me. I adore her. I love her. I admire her. I respect her. All of those wonderful things. And I'm just remembering all of those little things that happened when in the conservatory. The lovely Martha love notes, as I used to call them, that she would give to us all the time.
Notes she'd stick on you and then walk away.
Exactly. And I have them all like in a book in my bedroom. Like, they're all together. I've kept them all. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
And segueing from that a little bit, but hopefully on the positive side of things, clearly with this pandemic, our industry is changing, has changed, needs to change, if we are going to continue to survive. And I know that things are starting to open back up again, as I mentioned earlier. But I think that I wonder what your thoughts are on our industry and the way that we create the work that we do, and how much of a shift do you think will be needed, if at all, for theater to continue to survive and thrive in this new world that we're living in? It's a little bit of maybe a little bit of a loaded question. I don't know.
Well, I think we got to be honest about a few things. One of those things is I'm not sure that we can say theater will continue to survive and thrive, because let's be real. I've watched audiences decline over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So are we really thriving? And were we really on a path to sustainable survival before COVID happened? That's number one. Number two, does the theater as an industry need to change? I think it's needed to change for a long time. One of the things that's become very clear to me since our rehearsals were stopped and we've all been sort of cast to the wind, is that it's never been working for me. I love performing. I love theater. I love being on stage. I love those moments that you talk about. But the institutional practices I have to endure in order to find those moments are frankly soul-crushing.
Yep.
And it is an abusive industry. The sort of white American theater, and I mean American, I mean that in the Pan-American sense, is a predator. I remember somebody said to me once at Stratford, Richard Manette was quoted as saying, "The theater takes what it wants and what it needs." And it's true, but that's not how an artistic partner should behave. That's not a relationship. That doesn't build a company or a community. That is us working for a machine, and the machine will eat you up and spit you out, and that's what it's designed, in fact, to do.
Yeah.
And the training that I always received in theater school and otherwise, all kind of centered around, well, this is how you excel. This is how you survive this, right? This is what you have to do to make yourself strong enough to steel yourself to eat the bullshit. That's kind of always been the messaging, right? Tough love. Theater school has always been about, in my experience of theater school, and since I finished theater school and was, teaching and performing, there's always been this sort of undercurrent of, we got to break them down to build them back up.
Yeah.
And that's just fucking oppressive, right? Like that's not really teaching. That's something else. That's conditioning. That's grooming. And it's grooming artists to enter into an industry that is abusive, frankly.
Yeah, well, I think, I'm not going to disagree with you there. I think what I've noticed at times, at least through the education system with theater, is often, I think the best way to put it was, at times I could see where what was happening wasn't so much about what the student wanted or needed to learn, but it was about what the teacher or instructed wanted to teach.
Absolutely. I've done a lot of teaching as an artist, and every time I go in on behalf of a theater into a middle school, a high school to present material, it's always material that's been sort of presented to me as, here's our lesson plan, go deliver this. But I'm acutely aware now that as I walk into those spaces, I'm essentially participating in a colonial structure, right? It's a mission to civilize. Here is how we would like you to engage with the work that we're presenting. This is the appropriate way to receive what we're giving you, right? But what we're giving may not have any value to the people that we're actually talking to. So when does it become the onus of the theater to actually serve that community, as opposed to teach that community how to serve them?
All said. All said. Dude. Oh my gosh, 248.
So I guess ultimately this is where I want the industry to go. I want the industry to once again serve the people we claim to serve, as opposed to the rather egotistical practice of going, this is art, eat it,
right,
and enjoy it.
Are we far off from that, do you think?
Some of us, I think. Some of us are. Some of us are closer. I don't think I'm alone in this. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people that are producing work that really does do that invites people in, that talks about, that speaks to specific experiences of the world and says, you are welcome and this voice is necessary and vital. And but there are still those sort of very imposing vestiges of that feeling of art as imposition. It's tough to shake that completely, but I think we can. I think it's going to take a very concerted effort on our part to do so. Mm-hmm. And I hope that institutions like Stratford understand that the way we have been doing things at places like that has been detrimental, and it doesn't have to be that way. And it's actually not that painful to change the practice. It's just it's what's painful is the realization that you're complicit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful that we're going to continue to see some positive evolution.
Me too.
I think, and I think we were talking about this the other day too. Sometimes it's just like the vocabulary that we use when we talk about these things, I think, are important, and often I think either help or hinder the resistance that certain people feel about it. It's like I'm trying to, I try now to think about the evolution of our industry as opposed to trying to change things. Because you say change, and then the people who are traditionalists and have been around for a while sometimes are resistant to change. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you start to say we just want to evolve, or it's just going to grow, like, I don't know. Sometimes I just see you can feel when that wall goes up with someone, and I'm finding that I'm learning what the vocabulary how the vocabulary that I use influences how receptive.
Absolutely, and to that point, it's the reason that I am encouraging folks to be honest about where the theater was before COVID happened. Right, things weren't peachy. Right. This evolution has been necessary for a long time. You know, a species evolves in order to survive and thrive in its environment. The theater has not been thriving. Right, certain branches of it have maybe. Certain branches of the commercial theater have been able to survive in a capitalist world where they can sell a commodity, right? They can sort of merchandise the hell out of it, right? And make a brand out of a show. But by and large, the not-for-profit theater in particular has not been very successful in evolving to suit the environment that it lives in. And in some ways, it's sort of been feeding on itself for quite a long time. And I think that's what we really need to adjust.
Yeah, and make room for more different voices, because that's a huge thing that's lacking. We're coming up on the end of our time here, but this has been so great. But before we go, I just want to ask what is next for e.b.smith? What you got on the horizon?
Well, to the end of all helping the theater evolve, I've come back to Ohio University, which is my alma mater from my acting school days.
Right.
I'm pursuing a Master of Arts Administration and a PhD here over the next 4 years. And hopefully my goal is that the work and the research that I'm engaging in will help to find new ways to approach this work so that we can come back and restart the theater machine as a machine that helps people and not one that eats people, because that's what's necessary. You know, I don't want anybody to have the career that I've had. I want them to be fulfilled without reservation.
Right.
I don't want them to feel fulfilled despite the shit they've gone through. That's really important to me.
Well, those are wise words to share as we come up on the end of our time here, E.B. It's been such a great time, great experience to sit here and chat with you, talk with you, share with you.
Likewise, my friend.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have in some cases introduce you to some of our BTW public, and I look forward to I don't know, having you come back and working with us at some point.
I would love that. That would be fantastic.
I know the AD. I'll put in a good word. And it's this has been so great. I really, dude, so much admiration, so much respect for everything that you do as the artist and beyond. Sky Brandon, thank you for watching. I'll be on the call with you, Sky, in just over an hour. But seriously, that's been great. But before we sign off, I'm just going to remind everybody else about the what I was talking about before, the theater that's going to be happening around our community, and just a little bit of housekeeping. So thank you everybody for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is going to be available on our YouTube. So if you have anyone that you know might have missed this and is interested in hearing the conversation, Bridget! I love you, Bridget Wilson. I miss you so. Oh, see, I'm having more flashbacks to Peter Pan now.
We miss you too.
Oh, Bridget, we'll talk. And Dirty Dancing. Bridget and I were doing the Nobody Puts Baby in a Corner dance backstage. I was teaching her the choreography. Oh, it was so much fun. Sidebar. Oh, this is so good. I'm getting goosebumps. But yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody, please don't forget to check out Centaur Theater's Portico Projects, which is going to run from September 24th to October 3rd. Don't forget to check out Tableau Dotes on Point, which is playing in Point St. Charles, sporadically, usually on Thursdays, sometimes on Sundays, up until September the 27th. Look out for information. Beatrice Campbell, I love you, B. Summer of 2003 at the Piggery Theater with B and Douglas and Moira and everybody. Such a good time. Sidebar, come back, Quincy. Our friends at Geordie Theatre are going to be announcing soon, because they're in rehearsals for the Two Play Tour. But just like BTW is having a big anniversary this year, our 50th, our friends at Geordie Theatre are celebrating their 40th anniversary. So in the coming weeks, they're going to be announcing their anniversary season, as are we. So please look out for all of that. And all of the other companies in town. Look out for it and support arts as much as you can, because we need it. Scott Wentworth, Mr. Wentworth, hey, thanks for watching.
Yeah.
This is so great.
I love you too, B. Scott.
See, now I don't want to sign off. I just want to stay here and like watch all these messages. This is so great.
We should do this again, Quince.
I will happily do this again. We will. I'll get in touch. We'll make it work, because it'd be good actually to follow up, maybe get an update on some of the things that are going on, and then just get a little bit more into whatever we want to talk about, certain roles, certain plays, like that. Those kinds of conversations. I haven't had as many of it. As I'll just throw in really quickly, like as an AD through this pandemic, so much of what I've been doing. I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but it's been very bureaucratic, very like administrative, and so I miss being able to delve much deeper into the. I've been focused on the business of the business, but I'm missing the art of the business a lot lately.
For sure.
And so maybe we'll have another conversation, and we can just like spend a little bit more time on the art.
You got it, my friend.
Of our business. All right, thank you, EB. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Tell your friends. My friend, awesome. We'll be in touch. We'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.